From God's Unchanging Word Studios in New Orleans, we are pleased to bring you news, nuggets, and insights with today's host, Tom Carey.
Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to God's Unchanging Word in another edition for our news, nuggets, and insights. Today is Friday, December 14th, 2018, as we rush along to the end of the year. A lot of information. We're going to talk about something you maybe haven't even thought about. It's called the Data Processing Center's massive expansion. I'm going to give you some insight there that maybe you haven't thought about. Then we're going to talk about fleeing the dollar and the world preparing to leave the dollar, of course. And then we're going to talk about a nation preparing for Christmas. We're going to spend a lot more time talking about the news segment today, and we have one more week we'll get into the Christmas. We just want to introduce our Christmas program today. So now, the Temple Mount, altar dedication 12/10/2018. So let me take a moment to explain something. Every week when we do our news, nuggets, and insights, we get into the fish tank and we put our heads together and we talk about news and everything we want to cover. This week was exceptionally busy. So let me give you an idea and show you how we just started with the Temple Mount. There was an Alaskan earthquake, 7.0, and after that there's actually been 120 small quakes since the 7.0 earthquake. The border, the caravans, that still is an issue. And now they have the government down there supposing that we owe them $20 billion because of all their expense, because we won't let the illegals into our country. Now, not only do they want us to pay for them when we're here, they want us to pay for them when they don't get here. Interesting concept, interesting concept. Then, of course, Russia, if you haven't heard, just this week now, Russia sent 2 bombers, nuclear-capable bombers, into Venezuela, into our side of the continent to show their strength and say that we're not intimidated by this administration of the United States. Great Britain, you got the stock market in turmoil because of Europe with Brexit, because they didn't pass the vote, or they didn't even bring it up to vote and put it off for about a month, deciding whether they're going to be able to renegotiate to come out of Brexit, while the EU is saying there is no more negotiation. That's the only deal you're going to get. Then you've got the U.S. budget crisis. On Tuesday, President Trump, that's the day we're meeting today, President Trump is meeting with Pelosi and I believe Schumer to talk about getting the money he needs for his wall. And if he doesn't get it, he says he's going to shut down the wall. He's going to shut down the government until he gets the wall. How about the trade wars that are still looming in China? With the executive they had just arrested in Canada for the violation of the businesses that's taken place with China. Now they're going to retaliate, and China is fighting this whole thing, going back and forth with the trade. Then you've got the Middle East, which never goes away, never goes away. Then we have down, the last one is the Temple Mount. So we couldn't cover all those stories, but I wanted you to be aware that we try to pay attention when we weed out what is going to be just general news to get into what we believe would be more biblical focused prophetic events that affect your lives. So we're going to start now with the Temple Mount. So that's just the tip of the iceberg of stuff that comes up in just 1 week. On Monday, the Temple Mount, this is the group who actually is establishing all the shoot. Okay, let me start here again. All right, so we decided we'll just go ahead and start with the Temple Mount and the altar dedication. Here we have, this is from the Jerusalem Post, that the new altar fit the temple was dedicated outside the walls of the old city of Jerusalem. And I don't know if you can see that, but it's right here that they built. It's not put together. They cut the stones, they have them all set in place so that when it's ready, they're going to move everything into the third temple. And supposedly they believe that they're going to have the third temple built for the first coming of Jesus Christ, not his second coming, his first coming. So they're getting everything ready. They've been building all the instruments for service that goes into the temple, into the Holy and the Holy of Holies. All those things are being placed. And they believe that once they get that accomplished, then it'll usher in the return of Jesus Christ. This includes trying to find the red heifer. Now they believe they also have a red heifer that they can use for sacrifice. So anyway, it's moving further and further along. So now let's get into the news and talking about what we want to discuss today. First, we introduced this last week with France and the riots against the gas tax. Now, the gas tax is supposed to help climate change. So how's that working for them? I know they said the United States that it's going to be our fault because we pulled out of the accord, that we're not going to come up with all the money the rest of the world wants for this climate change. So now, you're beginning to see all these riots, what it's going to be like around the world when the world governance all comes together and demands everybody come up with money to prevent the climate change. So what are we looking at? All right, climate change funding. Just one day over this past weekend, the French police arrested nearly 1,000 protesters in Paris. This was December 8th. Over 1,000 protesters were arrested on Saturday alone, protesting the tax for global warming. Over 130 were injured. President Macron called for a special announcement on Monday to try to stop the riots, which he did. So now, let's talk about that for just a moment. I've got a video. All right, I've got a video here. This is from Tucker. It wasn't basically just France, but it was dealing with the issues of climate change that we're talking about. Then I'm going to come back after the video, and I'm going to talk about what the president of France did. Let's play that video now.
So riots are taking place in Paris and throughout France. They're about climate change, and they tell you a lot about the attitudes of the people in charge. Well, for decades now, elites have told the rest of us that they are deeply, deeply concerned about climate change, much more concerned than we are because they're deeper and more thoughtful and compassionate people. Bernie Sanders, for example, deeply concerned.
Donald Trump spoke last night, but somehow he forgot to mention the words climate change. What an outrage.
Climate change is causing devastating problems in our country and the world.
Climate change is the great global environmental crisis that we face.
In fact, climate change is directly related to the growth of terrorism.
Yes, Mr. Trump, climate change is real.
It's real, and he feels it deeply. Over at NBC, by the way, one of their anchors recently wondered if climate change is so serious that it might render our lives without meaning.
Fires, floods, storms, famine, the effects of climate change are all around us. And according to a new essay penned by Bill McKibben, it is shrinking our world. Not livably, not literally, excuse me, but livably. I read that New Yorker article today and I thought, gosh, how pointless is my life and how pointless are the decisions that I'm making on a day-to-day basis when we are not focused on climate change every day, when it's not leading every one of our newscasts.
Yeah. In other words, if it's not about climate change, it doesn't really matter. So let's take this seriously just for a second. Why not? They're always telling us, let's take what they say at face value. They care deeply about climate change. But if they care as deeply as they say they do, if they believe the destruction of the planet is as imminent as they say it is, why are they living the way that they do? You just saw the tape of Bernie Sanders. He cares a lot. And the news story came out today that said he spent $300,000 in a single month flying on a private plane. Huh. How could he do that? How could any of them own second homes if they really believe climate change is real? How are they using a car service when they could use mass transit? Why aren't they all vegans? Why aren't they living what they say they believe? They're not. The solutions they suggest, and this is not unrelated, are almost always going to be paid for by other people. The most regressive kinds of taxes, energy taxes, imposed on the masses. Well, as the riots in Paris show, the masses aren't into this. And why would they be?
Well, there you have it. All right, so what are we looking at here? As the lady says, what's life worth living if we aren't discussing climate change every day? It's the lead every single headline of every news story. Absolutely amazing what we're looking at. President Macron backs off his taxes for global climate change. How about this? He is one of the leaders of insulting this country and our president because we pulled out of the accord. Now, all of a sudden, while he's under fire, he pulls out of the accord. Why? Well, because he's going to lose his job. So now, all of a sudden, climate change isn't as important anymore. And so he also does this. He planned a tax increase, a planned tax increase for low-income pensioners would be canceled. All right, so now, all of a sudden, because the people don't like it, they're rioting. The same ones who are telling the United States how rotten we are because we're not going to come up with the money, when it hits their pockets, it's not important anymore. So what he does, he's canceling that tax, and he would begin to pay overtime pay would no longer be taxed, and employers should be encouraged, almost strong-armed, to pay a tax-free end-of-the-year bonus to employees, he added. So now to get everybody happy with him again so he can keep his job, now he's trying to strong-arm the businesses there to give your people bonuses with, and you know it's not in their budget. You're 3 weeks away from the end of the year. But give them bonuses anyway, settle everybody down. We'll come back and we'll talk about this later. Absolutely phenomenal. But here's my point, and this is very important. The riots you've seen there will continue to be escalating around the world in the years ahead when the governments aren't getting the money they need, where they have to extract it from the people. And there's only one place to extract it from, and that's from the low income, because the business people are the ones who are running it. And we need to get that fixed in our head, because this is just the beginning of what's beginning to take place. He went on to say, however, he refused to reinstate a tax on the wealthy. Now, isn't that amazing? They put the tax on the little people, but he's not going to reinstate it on the rich. Unbelievable what we're seeing. All right, going on. All right, so now it says he refused to reinstate a tax on the wealthy, saying this would weaken us. We need to create jobs. Well, in part, he's absolutely right. So the whole thing is built around a force for everybody to keep their jobs. I wanted to bring that out because I don't know if you're paying attention to that, what's going on. The climate change is, while there's hysteria everywhere across the board, it only affects if it doesn't take it out of their pockets. By the way, that's socialism. Remember that? Socialism is great until the people who pay for it all run out of money. So that's the same thing that we're looking at here. All right, now, let's try this next segment here. Coming up, this will be our first focus. Now, that was, believe it or not, that was just an aside story that's going to lead into our two focuses today. Do you have any idea what we're looking at here? Take a look at that for a second. What are we looking at here? There's this giant, massive building, and it's got all kind of, I don't know, what's all this around the outside of this building? Well, let's take a look. You're looking at a data processing center, which is in Douglas County, Georgia. Now, take a look at this picture. On the inside of the building, this is the cooling system that runs the data center. I don't know if you know it or not, but if you got a laptop or you got a computer, you put your hand in the back, they get really, really hot. In fact, if you're not careful, they can melt if you have no way to cool them off. These data centers take massive amount of energy to cool them down as they run these buildings of all this data that's going on. But that's not the story. The story I'm going to tell you in just a second, which is our focus. Here's the focus for the data processing centers, that they're growing every single year. All right, we're going to talk about the processing centers that are growing. We're going to talk about the social media centers, how they're accelerating with the processing centers. And we're going to talk about the shift in the controlling of the economics of the nations that's behind all of it. All right, so you ready? Let's talk about this. Data processing centers. The data processing centers have long been criticized by environmental groups for egregious energy use across the globe. Whoa, stop. Wait, what am I looking at here? I thought all of this is going to make us greenhouse friendly. Isn't this what they're talking about? Isn't this what we just talked about just a second ago with global warming? So they're building more and bigger, right? I bet you haven't heard that the environmental groups have been criticizing them. How come that gets by in the news? Right? But let's go on. I digress. A 2016 U.S. government study group found that data centers in the United States consumed 70 billion kilowatts of electricity in 2014. This is 4 years old, equal to 2% of the country's total energy consumption. Imagine how many hundreds of millions of people were here? over 300 million people, all the energy we use, all the businesses we use. You put them all together, just these centers use up 2% of the energy. That was 4 years ago. They've been building ever since then. That's just the United States. How about around the world? That number continues to rise as more of the world's populations gain access to the internet, cloud computing, and continues to expand, and artificial intelligence gets embedded more and more devices. Now, the cloud, it's not in the clouds. It's in these buildings. All the information, all the storages, everything that you have now gets taken from what you used to control and now is moved into the centers where companies like, Google, Amazon, Yahoo, Facebook, Twitter, all of that information now, left-wing, biased, controlling media is now moved from you to here. And by the way, did you realize you're paying to have that done? You're paying it. You're paying to have your information take somewhere else where they can shut it down and keep it away from you in the future. Wow. How about that? That's what's coming. As you can say, I'm really angry this morning about what's been going on. And part of the problem was I just left my house and they had another hearing up on the Hill about Google, and listen to the nonsense that we continue to go through in our country. So anyway, it's filtering into my program today. So anyway, I hope you bear with me. All right, Google invests another $404 million into an SG-based data center. Now look at this picture. All right, see the picture? I'm going to show in just a second here. Google invests in another $404 million as it expands its Singapore data center located in Jurong. Facebook's going to be over in Singapore, and they're going to invest another $1 billion. $1 billion. Now take a look. See, this is the old building, and they decided to add to it. That's amazing. 2% energy during that time, right? 2% energy. How much do you think we're expanding to the energy usage now? While they're telling the rest of the world, you got to keep cutting back. The centers, the people who control the media, who eventually going to control the monetary systems, continue to expand their usage. Contradictory? Absolutely. Now, this is from Data Center Frontier. Facebook accelerates its data center expansion. Now, this is in March 19, 2018. Since the beginning of 2017, Facebook has announced 5 new cloud campuses. See, the information isn't in the clouds. It's in campuses like this. Look at the size of this building that's out there. Now, everything you see on the sides, you know what that is? Those are cooling centers to keep all this stuff cool enough so that they can operate them. The social network now has 12 data center campuses around the globe, including 9 in the United States and 3 in the international markets. Facebook has nearly 15 million square feet of data space completed or under construction, with several million more feet in the planning stages. I don't know if you knew all that was going on. I did not know to the depth that it's going on. You know what I don't even have here today? I don't know how much government data centers we have, but I know they have massive buildings around the country also, and they're storing information. Here, Henrico County, this is continuing in the story. Henrico County in Virginia, Facebook will spend $750 million to build a 970,000 square foot facility in Newton County in Georgia. February 2017, Facebook unveiled plans to build a new data center in Stanton Springs, Georgia, and Facebook will invest another $750 million in Georgia. Now, they're touting it that this is really good information for the community and for the county. But you know what's not there? You don't see a lot of people in these buildings. These are IT. They're just computers control almost everything that's there. They don't need a lot of people here. The data center will be supported by renewable energy from the Walton Electric Membership Corporation. So I read that and said, okay, well, it's going to be renewable energy. You got to see this. Which will install, ready, hundreds of acres of solar panel on Georgia's electric grid as just part of the power supply. That building I just showed you is going to take hundreds of acres of solar panels to cool it down. Hundreds of acres. Unbelievable how much energy it takes to work these systems. When I seen that and they're trying to get everybody to come off the grid and go green friendly, how in the world do they expect a city? There's not enough land in the country to put enough solar panels around our country. Meanwhile, they want to shut down the coal, shut down the oil, and all these other things that are destroying our planet. And the hysteria continues to arise. I put this up here. I don't know if you can see it real close, but I put it up as big as I can. This is new development and expansions. In the center column where you see the red line around it, this is the countries that it's in, and the size of the warehouses where they're building these continual growth use. Look at China, 4.3 million square feet going in. Denmark, 1.5 almost million square feet going in. And you go all the way down. Now look at the little square on the right. In China, this is just from one company, all right? This is China Unicom. They're going to have under roof by 2024, 6.4 million square feet of data center for their company. That's just one company, 6.4 million square feet. How much energy is that going to take? Well, anyway, this is just the beginning. I mean, there's tons and tons and tons of more information that's out there that we'll be talking about and bringing in the future. But I wanted to bring that out to you. Now, what's our nuggets with this? What's the main concern here? I'm going to talk about two main issues that I see here right up front, and there are more, but I just want to talk about the first two. Now, we began talking about this just a few weeks ago, November 16th, in our 2018 program. By the way, that is online. If you go to God's Unchanging Word and you look at, just go into it and you'll find the News Nuggets and Insights. It'll have a drop-down bar. Every program we have done for News Nuggets and Insights is online, and you can go back and you can follow through. And I'm telling you that now because we're going to go back and refer back to the programs where we began introducing them and talking about them as the years and time goes on to show you that we've been trying to keep everybody informed in the progress of how things are working and how fast things are going. All right, this was November 16, 2018. This was right before Thanksgiving, and the segment we called Snuffing Out Free Speech. Obviously, when you look at the size of these data centers and they control what goes out and what doesn't come out, we're talking about these massive people now, the massive companies who are actually going to control what you hear and what you don't hear. So with the change in the way media is advancing, they will totally control what the public hears. And that's part of the reason Google is on the Hill today. And all the nonsense that you're hearing from the government officials, instead of talking about the right questions, they make the whole thing simply political and biased left or right. It's absolutely insane what's going on. Meanwhile, these companies get away with anything they want to get away with. That means if they don't agree with you, then you have no place in their platform. And I got a video, I'm going to show you that in just a second. Here's the second reason. The control of the economic engines of the nation. That's the second concern. From 2000, this is amazing what's changed. From the year 2000, remember the dot-com bubble? I'm sure everybody remembers the dot-com bubble of 2000. This is a report from CNN from back then. All of the companies together lost $1.7 trillion from the dot-com lesson. Now, what was that? That was an index of 280 internet stocks that lost $1.7 trillion from its 52-week high. Now, let me repeat that. Now, bear with me here. In the year 2000, there were 280 internet companies. There's a lot more than that now. There is a whole lot more than that now. They lost combined $1.7 trillion when the bubble failed. So what about today? We live in an economy where the market's up and the market's down. All right, we're seeing all this going on all the time. Let's take a look at that now and see what's going on here. November 20th, this is a report from November 20th. This is from the Telegraph talking about technology. All right, technology intelligence. Now, $1 trillion loss, all right, so stay with me here. $1 trillion loss for the 5 big tech companies as the market deepens. This is just a matter of a few days. when the market dropped 1,000 one day, and then it was down to 1,600, and then back into 1,000 or 900 or 800. Just yesterday, we're taping on Tuesday, it went down another 500 points. Before the end of the day, it was in the green. So we're seeing huge swings of uncertainty in the stock market as everybody's trying to figure out what's going on around the world. So now let's take now these 5 companies and let's talk about what 280 companies did through the whole tech bubble, did in just a week. 5 companies now. All right, so you have $1 trillion has been wiped off the values of the famous 5 FANG. Interesting name, FANG, all right? I'm glad they wrote it that way. It's pretty cool. It's hard to forget, FANG. The FANG technology companies in the Silicon Valley stock market rout as it deepened on Tuesday. This was of last week, 2 weeks ago. Shares in Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google's parent company, Alphabet. Those 5 companies have so much power and so much clout now. They are so big that those 5 companies alone lost $1 trillion in a matter of just a few days. Those losses are even more now than they were then. Now here's the big difference with the technology today in the stock market. At the turn of the century, when we had the industrial age, you had companies that actually produced stuff. They had wares and they had product. They were innovators for things that help grow and benefit pretty much people at large. And that moved the United States into the powerhouse that it is today. These companies are like facilitators. They don't produce, take a look, they don't produce. Well, Netflix does, they produce what? A lot of garbage on movies, video, filth that continues to infiltrate people's minds. But the rest, they're facilitating companies. Facebook? Do you need Facebook? No, you can get by without Facebook. How about Apple? Well, Apple does produce computers, and they control the media. And I got a video with Apple that's coming up in just a second. So let's see if we really need them or not. So now, they have all fallen by more than 20%, like a PC, that should be percent, from their summer peaks from the worst tech sell-off since the dot-com bust. All right, going on. So now think about it. If snuffing out free speech and controlling the economic engines isn't enough, what happens when they combine with the government to enforce their own policies? Isn't it amazing now that they're actually today, as we're taping on the Hill, there's another company up there right now, Google, talking about their company. Well, can't happen here? Think again. Take a look at this video. I'll be right back.
Freedom of speech. A lot of people voted for Donald Trump in the hope that they would have more of it. But 2 years in, the opposite has happened. Our ruling class has clamped down as never before on personal expression. Gone is the free exchange of ideas we were promised as Americans. It was supposed to be our birthright, remember? But in its place now, mandatory soul-deadening conformity. An entire population forced to repeat the same mindless platitudes or else. An axis of left-wing corporate power, academia, the media, and lawmakers have all aligned to curb your right to speak freely, which is to say, your right to think for yourself. When they control your words, they control your mind. The left used to deny that that was their goal. They're not pretending anymore. They're baring their teeth and snarling. Get in line or we'll hurt you. In a speech on Monday night, CEO Tim Cook pledged that Apple, one of the biggest and most powerful companies in the history of the world, will do whatever it takes to silence dissenting opinion.
Hate tries to make its headquarters in the digital world. At Apple, we believe that technology needs to have a clear point of view on this challenge. There is no time to get tied up in knots. That's why we only have one message for those who seek to push hate, division, and violence. You have no place on our platforms.
Hate. It's a real thing. There's a lot of it out there right now. But hate is also the word they use for views they don't like or questions they can't answer. Cook's real message is simple. We are holy, you are fallen, shut up and obey. CEOs didn't used to talk like this. They were in the business of selling products, not preaching sermons. Then, over time, conventional religion receded from public life. and people like Tim Cook and his fellow CEOs stepped forward to fill that void. It was not an upgrade. Apple has a lot more power than the Episcopal Church ever had, and much less humility and much less restraint. Leaders 100 years ago could tolerate dissent. They thought God would sort it out in the end. They didn't have to. Members of our modern ruling class consider themselves God. They render their own judgment. They view disagreement as equivalent to apostasy, an attack on the one true faith. In New York, to name but one example among many, a new bill in the state legislature would ban anyone who says something politicians don't like from buying a firearm. Prospective gun owners would be required to give up their passwords and to show their social media accounts to regulators who would inspect them for unapproved thoughts. Sound like something the Chinese military thought up? Yes, it does.
All right, so I stopped it there because then it was just going to get into the political side of it. So I want to get out of the political side of it and talk about the moral side that's going to affect you and I coming in. So I ask the question now. Here's the question. The government is going to tie in with the government. Can't happen here? Take a look at this. So now, what are we looking at? What was that we just saw? In comes the change of laws, the thought police. So now they're coming in, and they're going to go, if you're going to use your Second Amendment rights, and that's just a start. Anytime they pass a law, believe me, it always starts somewhere. It sounds like it's so good that we're going to use this to help protect our nation. It is just another way to control. And anytime a new law is passed, a freedom is removed. So here we have not just the freedom being removed, control is being established. So if you want to carry, now think about this now, if you want to carry your Second Amendment right to carry a gun, you're now in New York, where they passed this law, you're going to have to give them your password to your social media, to your media account. Where is it at? Oh yes, that's right. It's in the cloud, right? Unless you're fortunate to have an old enough system that you still have it in control for yourself. So now, if you don't want to turn it over, they will now have the right to issue an order to Google or Facebook or whoever's got your information that you're using to go in and start looking at what you think by what you type. If they don't like it in what you're saying, let's suppose there's something that's in there, oh, I don't know, something like, well, we don't agree with gay marriage. Well, according to Cook, that's hate speech. Realize where this is going? So now you don't get your permit, and they have the government coming in to go into the base that's being controlled by someone else, to go into your private thoughts, your private writing, the people you wrote to make it all public, and to deny you rights. You're going to see this. You're going to see this continue to grow. You begin to wonder, you know, when you read the Bible and you think about how does this play out? And when you read what's, you know, that no one's going to be able to buy or sell. Wow, this is one way. This is a way that's beginning to show you can't buy or sell a gun if you don't do what they're saying. So in other words, if you don't agree with eventually it's going to be the whole world what it's doing, and you don't agree with the Sabbath the way it's going to be, when they shut everything down, you're not going to be able to buy or you're not going to be able to sell. There's something the Bible talks about that in the book of Revelation. Follows up through Daniel, in the prophets, in the warnings. What am I bringing you today? I'm trying to bring you to show you how it progresses to bring us from the here and now to there. And this is just the beginning. And believe me, when this administration is gone and there's no one to protect the rights of the Constitution that God established, which was the fulfillment of the prophecies of the blessings to Abraham through Isaac and Jacob, you begin to see this nation tumble in ways we never, ever imagined that's going to take place. So now, what are we looking at here? Daniel 7:25. It says, "And he shall speak pompous words against the Most High, and shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change the times and law, and then the saints will be given into his hand for time and a half time." So what we're looking at is that God is showing us, and he said he would reveal when it was time, he would reveal to his saints what he's doing. I believe the things we're witnessing today and what God's been allowing us to bring you through God's unchanging word, through news nuggets and insights, is part of the insight of God unveiling the mask of Daniel, where he says, Daniel, go your way to the time of the end. I believe we are now at that time of the end. All right, so now, let's take our second segment. I know I told you it's going to be longer in the news today than in the biblical portion of it, but I needed to go into a little more in depth to tell you about what was going on. I won't take as long as here as in the first segment, but I hope you agree that it's important to understand what I just brought you. Europe planning to flee the dollar. This is a continued escalation of the monetary system, the change of our world. What can it mean to the U.S.? Now, this is the second focus that we're going to talk about here. Fleeing the dollar and the world preparing to leave the U.S. dollar. Is the dollar losing strength? All right, 2, Europe fleeing the dollar, and then the last is Europe's proposal to dump the dollar. So now let's go through this, and we won't take as much time here. When the trade wars started, we began talking about what some of the concerns would be way back as early as April 13th, 2018, with the trade wars beginning. We talked about in that show how the trade wars was going to open up a Pandora's box of concern because they've never ended well throughout history. And sure enough, here we are now. They're actually at that stage. Then we came back on April 20th the following week talking about trade wars with China, saying who is actually in the driver's seat. If you listen to one administration, the president's administration, we are. If you listen to the left, they are. If you listen to China, they are. So what is really going on? Then we brought up 2 more segments on Friday on June 15th and then June 29th. And in those 2 segments, we talked about the G7 summit and the trade wars were looming. And we followed up the second week by the lighting the fuses, which was the beginning by June 29th with the lighting of the fuses by actually beginning to put the tariffs on to begin to get a trade balance. So it takes time. These things just don't happen overnight. So what we've been doing is trying to bring you into focus week by week as the things went on. So now we're ready to go into another segment here. All right, so this was back in September of 2018. This was a question, this was an opinion from 2018 about trade. Now, this is just an opinion from this company. Trade wars, sanctions will erode the U.S. dollar's dominant role in global finance. All right, so now, is it doing that? Well, if you look at the dollar right now, it's pretty strong. Why is that? Because the rest of the world is still trying to figure out what's going on to position themselves to move away from the dollar. So in the meantime, those who control the power controls the dominance, and that's where the United States is right now. But it won't stay that way, and this is what this article is saying. All right, so back in '65, they're quoting from Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, was then the Prime Minister of France. All right, now he was president from, he was the Minister of Finance back then when this was quoted. He also became to be the President of France from '74 to '81. So he famously called the benefits that the United States reaped from the dollar's role as the world's main reserve as an exorbitant privilege. Oh, there we go, exorbitant privilege, right? Well, the problem is this is because the United States before 1965 was at least trying to follow God. By the time 65 rolled in and out and moving into the 70s, 80s, the United States began to move away from the privilege. The Bible calls it a blessing. The blessings that the United States says, if you do what I tell you to do, you'll be blessed. If you don't, you will be cursed. So the world saw it. He saw it. They didn't understand what they saw. But it was the blessings that God promised that if you obey, you're going to be blessed. And we became the most powerful nation on the face of the earth that ever existed. So here we have this exorbitant privilege now. That was back in '65 when he announced that. Then it goes on to say this. The benefits are diminishing with the rise of the euro and China's renminbi as the competing reserve currencies, and now President Donald Trump's misguided trade wars and anti-Iran sanctions that will accelerate the move away from the dollar. So that's what they're saying now in this article. That was written last year, September of 28, or this year, September 2018. And they are correct. This is what's taking place. It doesn't matter what your position is on the subject. And does it need to be taking place? Yeah, there needed to be a balance. There had to be a correction. The problem is that it's not going to go well and it won't end well. And the Bible says that our bought lovers will turn on us. And it appears, and we'll cover this in the future, that we are at the beginning of the stage of our bought lovers, those we put all the money out to, are now turning on the United States. You're beginning to see the beginning of that, which, by the way, whether we realize it or not, all of this is another prophetic prophecy coming into being right now, right before our very eyes. The benefit that the United States reaps from having the world's main international currency are diminishing with the rise of the euro and the yuan. And now President Trump's misguided trade wars and anti-Iran sanctions will accelerate the move away from the dollar. I put that up there and I wanted it bold enough to repeat to you because that's what's going on. It's happening right now, right there before our very eyes. Is the dollar losing its strength? Right now, no, but it will. It will continue to lose its strength in the years coming up. The government is preparing a bill to de-dollarize the Russian economy in response to incoming U.S. sanctions. In other words, as we continue to add sanctions and problems, they continue to move away from our country, all right, move away from our country and away from the dollar to depend on others. And Russia is already showing their strength, and we're not afraid of you, and move the bombers down to Venezuela. Unbelievable in a country down there with all the problems that they're having. All right, so now, the VT Bank, which is headed by Andrea Kostin, which is the leading Russian bank, said the bill could be approved by the Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev. And this is the de-dollarization. What that means is they're just not going to tie its oil in its reserve and everything it has to the dollar anymore. It's going to begin to move to other places. It goes on to say that Professor Abramov, which is the professor of economics at the Russian University, says this: if Russia succeeds in convincing the European Union and countries as our main consumers to make all payments in euros rather than dollars, this would be a real tangible blow to the dollar. The dollar is what's keeping our country stable, believe it or not, is because everybody needs the dollar. When the dollar is no longer the standard that everyone uses, then the debt will now come into play because there won't be any way to be able to absorb and pay for the debt that we have accumulated. And you'll begin to watch the United States begin to tumble in ways you've never seen before. You'll find the stock market not only tumbling, will be shut down for not just hours, but sometimes even days on end when this begins to take place. Could it happen tomorrow? Probably not, but it could happen soon when all these things are beginning to actually escalate. So now Europe's also planning to flee the dollar. Part of the problem they can't deal with it right now is because of what the administration has done with Iran. Europe has finally found the excuse to challenge the dollar. So that now the euro comes into play. The plan for a special purpose vehicle to bypass the U.S. sanctions on Iran could test the American dominance of global financial system. The new plan by Germany, France, Britain, China, and Russia to create a special financial infrastructure to work with Iran. So right now, if any country works with Iran because of the embargo the United States has put on, the United States penalizes them doing business with us. So what they have done now, they have found a third-party way, all these countries, to bypass what we have put on the embargo on Iran to go around the United States to do business anyway. And the way to do it is you get away from the dollar. We create our own type of background currency that we need to get around it. This is what's called their financial infrastructure to work with Iran, which could be a credible challenge to U.S. dollar's long global dominance. That's going on. That was actually being brought up and being brought to play as we speak today. So now, one more. Europe plans to be less dependent on the dollar. This now is December 2018. All these things have been taking place month by month. The European Commission took another step toward making Europe less dependent on the United States on foreign trade. Recently, the EC revealed that the group is developing plans that will greatly reduce the bloc's dependence on the U.S. dollar, that the proposal aims to boost the euro's global role to achieve its full potential. In addition to that, they've been passing rules and laws to be able to build a military to be able to protect themselves. So what are we seeing? We're seeing the United States, as it flexes its muscle, the rest of the world is moving away, and it's going to come back to hurt the country. is biblical prophecy. And the only way to stop it is for this country is to turn back to God. And it won't do it. China planning to flee the dollar. Here we go. China, currency war will escalate China's petro-yuan. It challenges and the U.S. military-backed petrodollar as the U.S. dollar continues to lose its status as the world's premier reserve currency. All right, we've got a little picture here of the two, of Russia and China. The reality of a world war seems inevitable. Now, this is interesting, all right? This is from Global Research, that this is what the Bible prophesies is going to come. We said with the trade wars, what will they bring about? We said it opened up the Pandora's box. And if it's not carefully orchestrated, this is what they're saying now, that if this doesn't go down right, the reality of a world war seems inevitable, not possible, inevitable, especially when major countries such as China, Russia, and Iran are making strategic moves to bypass the U.S. dollar in favor of other countries such as China's petro-yuan. All these things are going on behind the scenes, and you're not hearing about it in the news. These are issues that affect prophecy in the future. They will affect our lives, and we need to be talking about these issues. All right, so now, I believe this is the last one. When the U.S. and President Trump decided to renege on the JCPOA, Iran nuclear agreement, it set in motion the will within Europe to reject this action and seek alternatives to the dollar hegemony. Notice, they didn't like it. Why? Because they want to do business with Iran. They want the money and they need the oil. And they resent the United States telling them they can't. And so what they're going to do, they're telling the United States, we're going to build our own and we're going to do it without you. And besides, a plan, and seek alternatives to the dollar hegemony, and besides, a plan to create their own continental SWIFT alternative, the European Commission on December 3rd initiated plans to not only drop the dollar as a trade settlement currency, but also to create their own petro-euro for use in energy deals. When they get around where they don't need the dollar with oil, they don't need the United States. You're beginning to see all that move in play right now. It's all behind the scenes. And when it's set in play, it's going to hit this country and the people here like a brick, just hit them over the head. All right, so I just wanted to bring all that out to you, and I knew it was going to take a lot of time. That's why I decided to hold off most of our Christmas stuff. So, but I do have a Christmas video here I'm going to show you. That we take a little break, and we'll come back and tell you about a sermon that I want to offer you for Christmas. All right, so when we come back, we're going to be talking about, I forgot to change that, A Nation Under Blessing. We're actually going to be talking about Christmas Unwrapped. All right, so the video is actually from the History Channel. It's called Christmas Unwrapped, and I'll be right back.
We've all heard the biblical origins of Christmas, but societies have been celebrating light and birth in the darkest days of winter centuries before Jesus walked the earth. In the Norse country, this winter celebration was known as Yule. Around December 21st, the winter solstice, fathers and sons dragged evergreens indoors as reminders of life and set logs on fire as a promise of good fortune. Ancient Rome had its own December festivals. 1 week before the winter solstice, Romans began celebrating Saturnalia, an orgy of food and drink in honor of Saturn, the god of agriculture. Some Romans, particularly soldiers and government officials, also worshipped Mithra, the sun god. It is believed that to this small but powerful sect, the birthday of Mithra, December 25th, was the holiest day of the year. By the 1st century AD, pagan traditions were being challenged as Christianity took hold throughout the empire. But Christ's birth date remained a mystery, since the Bible doesn't mention exactly when he was born. Since pagan Rome already celebrated the birth of Mithra on December 25th, it is theorized the church adopted the date as the birth of the Christ child. In the 4th century, the church made it official, declaring December 25th as the feast day of the Nativity. The church knew it could not outlaw the pagan traditions of Christmas, so it came to accept them. The evergreens traditionally brought indoors were decorated with apples, symbolizing the Garden of Eden. These apples would eventually become Christmas ornaments. The story of Santa Claus also begins in the 4th century with the death of Nicholas, a beloved Turkish bishop. The anniversary of his death became known as St. Nicholas Day. On December 6th, good children woke to gifts from the kindly saint. Bad children sulked away with nothing. In Holland, he was known as Sinterklaas. 1,500 years later in America, a seminary professor named Clement Clark Moore reimagined the legend of St. Nicholas. In 1822, Moore wrote a poem called The Night Before Christmas about a good-natured saint named Santa Claus, who was pulled by a group of reindeer and came down the chimney on Christmas Eve. Like St. Nicholas, Santa Claus spread good cheer and gave gifts to children. Less clear was exactly what this Santa Claus looked like. Then in 1863, Thomas Nast, a cartoonist for Harper's Weekly, settled the matter once and for all with his version of the Christmas saint. Nast's Santa was rotund and jolly, with a full white beard and a sack full of toys. An American icon was born.
Well, welcome back. I don't know what you got out of that, but I'll bring this out because I don't want to make too light of it because it's pretty serious, and I want to mock the rest of the world who's doing this. But it's important that we need to understand what's going on here. So we're going to do the rest of today and the next week. We're talking about Christmas Unwrapped, because you see what we just saw, that Christmas, and by the way, Easter, Christmas and Easter, these are anchors. I mean, these are the hinges of Christianity. So Christmas, basically, the hinge is built upon supposition, paganism, and a lie. And that's the foundation for Christianity. The problem is that both of these, that the foundation and the pillars of mainstream Christianity, the problem, they were both in existence before Christ was ever born. It doesn't exist. The whole thing is a fallacy. And you just heard it from the History Channel. But the world will ignore the truth and believe a lie and believe up the imaginations that people put together. Both of their origins have their roots in paganism and not from the Bible. Absolutely amazing. Now, I don't have time to tell you about it all today because of all the information I brought you. So I want to offer you this sermon. You can go online. Do we still have it in print? You can still write in for it, by the way, and you might want to get this so you can share this with others. It's called December 25th, the Day of the Invincible Sun. Or you can, right now, you can go online and you can watch it or download it to your computer. All right, December 25th, the Day of the Invincible Sun, and we go into the history of what all this is about. So be sure you get this. If you haven't seen this sermon, you need to get that right now. All right. So let's begin wrapping up our program. I do have one more segment I'm going to bring in this little segment coming up here. When we were up in Newport, in Rhode Island, we went to Newport with Mo and Jean Dion in that area just a couple weeks ago. And what you're looking at was a building that was attached to the National Historical Society. And the reason we went there is this. It is the oldest Baptist meeting house in the United States. It's been restored. But what the headline doesn't say, it's a Seventh-day Baptist church. All right? So it is actually in Rhode Island. It is the oldest Sabbath-keeping church in Rhode Island. It was established, it was actually built in 1730, and it was established from a group of the Seventh-day Baptists from the 1600s. All right? In its history now, it was moved 3 different times. It never got torn down. It's almost like God put an instrument there to keep the Sabbath in front of everybody's mind. So I got a picture. I found most of these online, but let me back up here because we were there and we were taking pictures. And if you can take a look at the left picture, you'll see me inside the building. But when they came in, they said, "No, you can't be taking pictures." So I wanted to interview them for News Nuggets and Insights. They said, "No, you can't interview us either." I said, "You're a historical society. How do you get the information out?" No electronics. So anyway, we at least had a couple of pictures that Mo had taken before they told us we couldn't take pictures. All right, so now getting back to this. All right, so this is a picture that I found online, in that the building was finally restored in 2009 to its third place of its movement, which is actually attached to the Historical Society building. Now, to your left here, you can pull that up on the screen, Jeff, and see the left is what it was before it was restored, and it's just a little bit different than it is now. And it looks like they restored it back to the original colors, and they had the plaques on it so that we went and saw. And so now this was interesting. I'm going to read this to you. This was across the street. There's a graveyard, and they got a plaque over here. It says, Sabbath keeping spread during the 17th century. Sometimes it was as a result of persecution, but it was certainly because of renewed access to the scriptures. In America, Samuel and Tracy Hubbard began keeping the Sabbath as a result of their careful Bible study. They, along with Stephen Mumford, formed the first Seventh-day Baptist Church in the New World at Newport, Rhode Island in 1671. So I thought that was pretty interesting, as us being Sabbath keepers, just to give you a little bit of the history. And then I also found this online. So this is just, it was a card of, it was online showing some of the renovations that they went through to bring the building back to its original finish. And you can find this online, or just you can zoom it in or get a bigger picture if you want to see more and more what's going on there. It's a very small building. It's a really, really small building that they did, but it's amazing that it's actually been restored. All right, tomorrow I'll be in Mobile, Alabama. Audrey and I and Jeff and Georgianne will be over in Mobile, and I think this is the right picture this time. I had a picture last week, and they said, no, that was the wrong picture. It's in this area. I went to Google with the address they gave me, all right, but this is the picture they pulled up. All right, it's tomorrow at 10 a.m., 5563 Jackson Road in Mobile, Alabama, or you can contact Bobby Edmonds at 251-709-0366. That's 251-709-0366. And he can give you information and directions. And they tell me it's really close to the interstate and easy to find. So we'll be there tomorrow. So if you're anywhere in the area, come on by. We'd love to see you and spend the Sabbath with us over there with the group. Oh, okay, that was the old picture. Here's the new picture I pulled in. So I went looking. I got to try to get another picture. So maybe this is the place. But anyway, this is the general area where they meet at for church. So if you find this, look for people with coat and ties on, getting dressed, going to church, and you're in the right place. You're in the right place. All right, in the mail this week, a sermon that I did a while back, Our Reproach Rolled Away. I think it's worded a little differently, but it's talking about our God taking away our reproach. And a sermon by Chuck Hunt, simply Calling. All right, that's the name of the sermon he gave, Calling. All right, well, that's it. All right, there. We have a video that we're going to be showing you as we bring this to a close. A little short video, inspirational video. We'd like to close with a little positive video, and it's called Hope in Darkness. Enjoy the video. Well, that's it for our program today. Appreciate you watching, and glad you could be with us. Just want to mention from all of us here at God's Unchanging Word, as we watch our season change from fall to winter, probably winter in your area, a lot of snow around the country. Thanks for watching. You might want to go back and catch the first half of this program with all that information that we brought to you. Really, really impacting our country. So you can take a look to see what's going on. And as always, we ask, please take this information and share it with everybody you know. They will love you for it, or not. Till next week, God be with you.